Hello, everyone.
Hey,
How's it going?
good.
Um,
So, okay, yeah, there is agenda now, and we also have to revisit the thing that we discussed a month ago and maybe incorporate that into the roadmap.
yep. And John, do we need to move your item up from the last meeting for discussion? I don't think we got to
Yeah,
it.
that's probably a good idea.
Okay. Let's do that. Okay, Mandar, do you want to, since you added that to the agenda, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean this. So this was Rama's proposal from some time ago, and we had a soft agreement on having HTTP, having the metrics published using the prom JSON format and using HTTP callout. And then there is the other kind of related thing, which is instead of that, or in addition to that, use Envoy metrics service if it is configured. And a PR and a doc has just been sitting there with sort of no progress. So that's I mean basically it's sitting there for too long, right? We want to try to avoid another WASM API of this. So I think we should either vote it up or down, right? I mean, if we vote it down, then Rama and whoever else is waiting for it can find some other solutions. And if we vote it up, someone else is going to work on it. So this is an occasion where, yeah, as long as we approve it, someone will actually deliver it.
Yes. I mean, do we have, I mean, I guess I wasn't clear that we had decided that we wanted to use prom JSON versus some other format, but if we think we have agreement there, is there anything else left that's controversial about the proposal?
I think that's the piece that I'm not clear on. Like, why shouldn't we just go for like an open telemetry format? This
Open telemetry
right? I mean,
format instead of prom JSON.
yeah. Like, I'm still unclear as to so now what we want is just publish the metrics to some other server because this user does not, they don't use Prometheus, right? They have some other method of, but is it very common? I'm still struggling to understand that. Like, does it feel like we should take the burden for doing this? And who else needs this functionality?
John?
I have this same concern. Like, it seems like, so if you look at like Kubernetes or, I mean, there's tons of infrastructure things like Grafana, I don't know, Kali, whatever. I don't think any of them publish metrics, right? Like they have OpenTelemetry or Prometheus metrics, and that's how it's exposed. And if you want to do something else, you would, have something scrape it and then translate it. Like I know at least there's like a Prometheus to stack driver or adapter type thing. So it feels a bit weird for us to go and add some custom metrics thing. Like, it just seems like an unreasonable expectation that you're going to say, hey, I'm going to have this Kubernetes cluster and I'm going to deploy like 50 Helm charts because it's what people do. And they all need to use my custom metrics format because I don't use Prometheus. And if you don't have that, which I don't think is ever going to happen, then why does it make sense for us to be the one application that does do that?
Yeah, I mean, basically, we should have some standards here, which is, as in, standardized way of doing this. Prometheus is already standardized. If you need something else, I will then just say use open telemetry and then create an exporter or a translation layer, like John said. Anything else, it's just unnecessary burden.
Refresh my memory, Mandar. This was because they didn't want to run a scraper in addition to everything else they had. Is that
right? They could not run us. They could not run scrapers. So they packaged the scraper, I think, with their STOD because there were few STODs, but they could not package scrapers with all Istio agents. So I think that open telemetry export is also fine, and then they can have an open telemetry agent.
well? Does that address your concern? I mean, we would have one way of publishing versus or pushing versus requiring pull. Or do you still think
Yeah,
that
I guess if it's, I mean, yeah, I guess if it's open telemetry, then that's fine. But any custom way seems a bit suspicious.
okay? And Kwat, I'm trying to follow your +1. Is that from that last suggestion?
Yeah, it's if you use a separate process, it would be better because you don't have to do JSON processing for each sidecar.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we have consensus then? We'll proceed with this, but we want it to be open telemetry based.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So keep that down. Okay. John, did you want to talk through your doc? Let me share that.
Yeah, so we have been working on the telemetry API, of course, and one thing we're going to need to do is provide a sort of migration path for each of the three aspects of the API. I think it's a similar problem to solve, but actually the solutions will be entirely different for all three because they were originally configured differently. So I've laid out some ideas here. I think some of them are fairly straightforward, some are a bit more complex. So if we want to go to the access logs one first, that's one's the easiest. So maybe we can just get that out of the way. So right now you install Istio, you have no access logs. And I think that is what we want to continue to have happen. But we want users to go from configuring it in the mesh config to just creating a telemetry. So here and in the other ones, I propose that in extension providers, we provide defaults for all of the providers that have common defaults. So what that means is that users would not need to, for like the most common cases, just turning on access logs or turning on Prometheus, they don't need to go mesh with mesh config. They can just create a telemetry. So for access logs, that's pretty much all we would need. And they would just create the telemetry API saying provider equals, I had built-in /standard out here, but in the actual implementation, which I think might have merged already, I think I called it Envoy, but we can bike it on the name if anyone has better ideas. So that's pretty much it. Access logs, the simplest one for sure. So any comments there?
Nope. I think
Okay, I will assume that means everyone agrees, which is good because if we got hung up on access logs, we're going to have a big issue on metrics. Do you want to go maybe tracing next, I guess?
Sure.
That's the next easiest one. Yeah, tracing's a bit tricky because our current default is we have 1% sampling to the Zipkin address, which from most users doesn't exist if they don't happen to install it that way. So I believe our desired default is that there's actually no tracing enabled. And that makes the migration quite a bit more challenging because we're actually trying to change the default behavior. If we decided that, hey, we still want 1% tracing and Zipkin as the default behavior, this would be much easier. But as I think, I don't know, is there a consensus that we do want the default to be no tracing enabled?
I feel like we ran into lots of issues with people, complaining and performance issues about having it on but not going to anything, right? If you don't
Yeah.
actually have Zipkin.
Yep.
So it seems like that was a bad default, and we should take the pain of moving away from it, unless someone else has an objection to that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree, as long as we can come up with a not incredibly painful transition, which I'm hoping we can do. But if it ends up being that, like, we're going to break a ton of users, then maybe it's not worth it.
So right now, if someone has deployed Zipkin in their environment, then the defaults today just work for them, right?
Yeah. Well, they deployed it, happened to be called Zipkin and Istio system with that port, but
I think that's the standard port, no?
it is a standard port. But
Yeah.
I mean, deploying an Istio system, that's just if you follow our samples, which may or may not be the case. Probably a bad practice too. But yes, it would work for them if they had that set up.
Right. So those are the only users that we will really break.
Yeah.
For the users that either don't deploy it or don't deploy it in the right place, their tracing is effectively disabled.
Yes. Well, they get the cost of tracing, but not the benefits.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that it's that, I don't know, risk of the risk that those users would have is actually fairly low. As in, sorry, if we have it in upgrade nodes, then it is pretty clear what is the equivalent config that you need to install, which we will just put there saying, hey, if you are deploying Zipkin like in the samples, then this is the telemetry config that you need to put in to get that behavior back. And I suspect that that's only going to be a small minority of cases.
Niraj, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we will need a warning or something in the upgrade node, but I think we should also try to create some minimal tooling or something, just so that if anyone has followed our recommended approach before, I understand it's from samples, then we will break those exact customers, right? Who said, okay, I'm going to deploy tracing in Istio system.
Right. So I think a PreCheck is pretty trivial right here.
Yep.
You just see if it's installed, and if it is, then you say, okay, here is the configuration.
Equivalent config. Exactly. That's what I was saying.
If we can go through the options real quick, one of them's pretty similar to that. So the first option is kind of the naive approach, where we change the default and we try and make users aware of it. The second one is we can, and I think this is probably a really bad option, but we can make it so that users have to explicitly configure the tracer value. So they either have to explicitly turn it off or explicitly turn it on. That seems really bad because that is going to be, require every single user to do it, which is pretty annoying. The other one, which is kind of similar to what you guys were suggesting, is kind of do the same warning thing, like require it to be explicitly set, but do it only if Zipkin service is actually detected. So that way, if you do have Zipkin, then that's fine. You just know that you have to make a small config change, and it will give you a warning, say like, hey, you're using Zipkin, set tracer to Zipkin if you want it to continue working in the future. And then in 1.12, we can just change the default. I think that like the general concept of looking if they have this service is the right way to go. The details on how exactly to expose that, I very open to ideas.
I mean, pre-check is the most obvious way, right? Any reason not just to do that?
So you do a pre-check and it would say, hey, you have Zipkin service. Make sure that you use telemetry instead of
Correct.
the default.
Yep. So that we don't add anything to the runtime.
Well, this would be the install runtime, so it's
Right. Yes. But I think pre-check is still like one level removed, right? It's kind of a more tactical thing, once and done type thing. So
yeah. I mean, we could do both, right? I don't know if everyone is realistically running pre-check before they upgrade. Is my slight concern.
okay, that's fair. Do we want people to be running pre-check, right? Because there are
Yeah,
kind
we
of
do want them to.
more dangerous things, well, that have already happened that pre-check helps them with, and stuff in the future as well is going to use pre-check. So yeah, I mean, I think pre-check is kind of both necessary, and you're arguing that it may not be sufficient, so that we have to add it also to like istio install. And is that?
Yeah, that was my concern. And it doesn't know if you do pre-check. It doesn't know if you explicitly configured Zipkin as the tracer, or if you are using the defaults. They're not distinguishable at that level. In install, we know if they set this values.global.proxy.tracer, because I assume we'll still allow that setting in a few more releases, right? We're not going to force all users in 1.11 or 1.12 to use the telemetry API.
We will continue supporting the values API for a little bit. Yes.
So in that case, we would need to be aware of what was set there, which I don't think. Maybe we do. Actually, it might be possible. I think we stored in that injector config map.
Right.
So.
Yep.
But I think it will show the defaults, so you can't tell if they explicitly set it or it's set because we have it in the values.yaml defaults.
So looking at the config, right, whether default or explicitly set, and looking at the presence of Zipkin service together are authoritative.
Yeah, if they haven't set tracer and they do have Zipkin, then they definitely need to do something. Either set tracer or use telemetry.
Right.
Or acknowledge that they have Zipkin that's probably doing nothing and remove it or something.
So if a user did set the global proxy tracer to a value which is not default, even in that case, they will need migration, right?
No, that's, well, so long term we'll remove, like we have this whole values telemetry API essentially. In the very long term, we'll remove that, I think. But that is easier. That is just like a deprecation warning on install if you're using it for like 3 releases or something long, because it's pretty core functionality. And then we drop it. I don't think that's a challenging problem. We just, I mean, we have a bunch of deprecations like that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I'm still kind of mildly opposed to adding things into sort of istio install if we want to make pre-check the tool. But because it's going to have like lots of these tactical things which will just like needlessly add up there, right? Whereas we expect in PreCheck, these are written as separate components. We just delete the file and it's done.
Yeah, I agree and disagree. I don't know. Like my other concern is I don't know if PreCheck can actually tell if they set it. So I guess we can make changes that could make it work. Especially if we do this migration in 1.12, then we can
Right.
kind of set them up in 1.11 so that we don't set the tracer field in whatever config map. But I don't know. I think we can make it work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so-
Okay. I think that's enough to go on. We can iron out the exact details, but it sounds like we have high level agreement on tracing.
I did have a question though. I mean, the timeline, we're talking about 111 and 112. Do we think that that's still the right timeline given that we're at code freeze now and the APIs are still experimental? I mean, is this the right timeline for this change, or should we bump it by one?
That's a good question. We could probably bump it by one. I wrote this a few weeks ago, so more optimistic back then. But
yeah, I just don't know. How long will it take? Or is it possible to get another PreCheck in or something by release date at this point?
yeah, I mean, we could get the PreCheck, I think. The question I have is, do we want to be pushing users to telemetry this aggressively, this early? If we still consider it experimental.
Yeah. I mean, tracing is the one I feel the best about. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how others
So
feel.
in absence of inviting people to use the API, how are we going to get any feedback? Because because at least like for some people, it's like, okay, well, Envoy filters, that's what they do, and somehow it works.
No, I mean, I think I'm in agreement that we need people trying this out. I just wanted to make sure everyone was okay with saying go use this in 111 or 112. Given that we don't have, I mean, the documentation doesn't even exist yet, right? So it's a commitment to add docs and a couple other things for 111 if we make this choice.
So for docs, the reference docs will be published automatically, right? So do we in addition to that, so the doc that you're talking about is like a blog post, right? That's what you mean by doc, correct? Or do you mean some other, like an explainer doc?
I think we want something other than the API documentation, like some layer that shows use above that. I mean, there's one that's out there, right? It just hasn't been approved or merged for tracing.
Oh yeah, right. Yes, for tracing that is right.
And so I think if we're going to change the default and suggest people use this, we should commit to making sure that makes the 111 cut and is findable. I don't know about a blog post. Sure. I don't know what the bar for blog post is these days.
Well, I mean, new API is the right bar for a blog post, I think.
But at what stage? At alpha stage? At experimental stage? When do we announce?
Yeah, that's a so again, right? Not looking at effort or kind of committing resources to it. But if we want to invite people to use it, then now should be the time when we promote it. Not as stable, right? We still say this is experimental, but like please use it and give us feedback.
Okay.
But Doug, also one thing that is in favor of doing this earlier is that they actually kind of have two options. One is to use the telemetry API, but the other one is just to explicitly configure the tracer setting using the values API. So I feel like that kind of suggests that maybe it's fine to do it early because they don't have to use the newer thing. They just need to be more explicit.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I think given there's still open issues about the default behavior of tracing, so I think it makes sense to use this as a way to address them. Should we look at metrics?
Yep.
Yeah, so metrics, I think it's fairly tricky because we have this extensive API through values.yaml, which allows all sorts of customization. But fortunately, we still want to keep the same defaults where Prometheus is enabled automatically. I think in terms of that, it's pretty simple. We can just add it as the default provider for metrics. If they want to remove it, then they can set that explicitly to empty list or to, I don't know, whatever else they want, Datadog or whatever they want as their default. So that's no problem. But one issue we'll have is that we need to make sure that we don't end up with the Envoy filters that they've configured, as well as the new code that we're configuring based on the telemetry. And we also want to make sure that all the settings that we had in values.yaml still work. So if they set like, I can't remember what's allowed, like some config override or something, then that should also work. So there's a few options we discussed, which I'm actually, yeah, it doesn't look like I added them all to the doc. So for most users, it's just enablement is the biggest thing. So I put a bit of a blurb about that. I think that we can, just looking at like the values enablement, add some moderately complex if statements to the mesh config to kind of configure the default provider to various things to preserve the functionality. And that way, and then we just remove the Envoy filters. The tricky part is all the other customization, like the config override. So I think we have a few options. One is we can just make it so if they use config override, that's fine, but we just use the Envoy filters instead of looking at the telemetry. We can also just immediately block the install or warn or something that has been deprecated. I think the users of config override are fairly advanced users, and there's likely not too many. So we're probably not breaking like someone that's trying to install book info. This is probably breaking someone like Carl or something. The other option is we could read in the values.yaml into Pilot and actually use the config overrides, like the whole values.telemetry within Pilot, and kind of directly read that to configure telemetry. I don't know. This one's a lot less concrete than tracing right now, and I think it's a lot more complex. But is there any thoughts on this?
So I think reading values is something that we will have to do anyway, right? Like for these kinds of changes, generally where we're moving things from values to other APIs. So I think if reading values gets us there now, I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, or we could, I kind of thought of this before, but we could actually create a telemetry resource based on it. So if you have like config override set, then we make like a root namespace telemetry that has that config override, I guess. And then
So-
give a bunch of warnings that this is a really bad idea and you should just create it yourself.
So also part of upgrade tooling.
I wasn't even thinking as part of upgrade tooling, like just in the Helm template, like in the Helm charts, we could just, if config override, then, create telemetry, just like we create the Envoy filter, but instead we create a telemetry.
Interesting.
I mean, we definitely don't want to do that long term, but if we, say that we're going to remove it in a release or two, then probably not so bad.
Yeah, that's
Can we capture everything in config override? I've forgotten what's inside of config override.
so in the stack driver config override, or wait, yeah, it's definitely it's a pass through. So it just takes what we have and then it pushes through. So I don't think our new API supports that today, does it? No.
No.
Right. So I think that part, until the API catches up, we won't be able to do anything.
Yeah, it looks like for Prometheus, there's also inbound versus outbound. So I'm not sure we can do that, or can we, because we have all the metrics names?
We should be able to do inbound, outbound. I mean, I say that without having looked at what the full scope of config overrides is, but
It's basically just a pass through into.
Yeah, if you look at the link, if you can open it up, it might help everyone understand
Okay.
what's supported.
this is the link you sent?
Yeah. So at least in Stackdriver, it looks like there are few options here in config override. Oh, that's for access. It's complete. It's a complete pass through. Sorry,
Yeah.
I read it wrong.
Yeah, it's a complete pass through. Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Okay, so I've never seen anyone use it, but maybe I don't know many such advanced users who are using this option for gateway inbound and outbound sidecar or Prometheus.
Peter, do you like? So I remember people asking for this.
So the config override for Prometheus is widely used, and people use it to customize metrics.
Yep.
Interesting.
So on the positive side, they don't have to use Envoy filters. But on the negative side, now we need to somehow migrate this API.
Yeah, and is it documented anywhere on how to use this?
Yeah, it's documented. I just sent it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think gateway specifically was useful, which again, until this was added, we didn't provide a way to do it, which was to have different things for gateways versus sidecars.
So I think, John, this is too much magic to auto create.
Yeah, which is why I think that like a pre-check / migration tooling would actually be better.
Yeah.
So yeah, it takes this and says, okay, here is what you should actually configure, and then let them put that in their CI/CD and all that, right?
Okay. So would it make sense to have, if they have these customizations, so the enable and disable, which is what I expect most users, actually most users probably don't touch it at all.
Correct.
That we can do, I think, is no problem. We can just configure the mesh config for that. And then for anything else, we can just continue to create the Envoy filters and tell them that they should migrate off them. I'm a bit worried about ending up with telemetry and Envoy filters and then getting double config applied, though.
I think sufficient warning for a few releases, and then when it stops working, right? It's no different than any other thing that we deprecate. My issue is, do we know if everything in there can be done in the new API? And if not, then the
Actually,
bar.
right.
Go ahead.
No, I don't think everything. I don't think everything can be done. The Prometheus part, maybe that can be done, right? Because now we support overrides and. But okay, so let's separate Prometheus from Stackdriver.
Mhm.
Do we think Prometheus can be done?
Yes.
Yes, it can be, right?
Yes.
Yep. And Stackdriver cannot be done. We know, we kind of know that there is no pass through in the new API.
Right.
So I guess, Doug, it's in our interest to get the Stackdriver thing up to spec as fast as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah.
a lot of that pass through is logging related, right? And we just don't have many knobs on logging right now.
Right.
But when that comes, that should be doable.
Okay.
I think this just makes the barrier a little higher for experimental or alpha, whatever stage we want to call it, to maintain parity. But I think the approach that I think Mandar and John, you were just repeating, it just still makes sense to me. If you're continuing to use Envoy filters, you get a warning, and then when the time comes when we are going to not support Envoy filters, at that point, if you haven't migrated, you're out of luck. And hopefully by that time we have full parity.
Yeah, I guess the other concern is when you actually do want to cut over. Like I've been trying to avoid having some special logic about Envoy filters in the pilot code, where like we know that this is the Prometheus Envoy filter, whatever. But I'm having like we need a way to gracefully migrate over, and I don't think that you ever want to have 2 stat filters or 0 stat filters. But there's no way to like atomically remove the Envoy filter and add the telemetry, right?
Atomically, well, I mean, no, it's no. Look, Kubernetes doesn't.
Yeah, like I feel like we need I don't know if we can avoid adding special logic in the Envoy filter patching code for the telemetry filters, where like if telemetry CRD is configured, ignore the Envoy filters or something.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. We have similar concerns in even the WASM API as well, right? Like you have new thing coming up, you have your old Envoy filter, and there is no atomicity. So you either get rid of everything and then you add the new one.
Right.
Or
right.
so actually, that said, right? The option is to get rid of everything and then add the new one. And okay, so then the cost of that is there is like a blip.
I think that would be fine for 95% of users, but I could definitely see that very serious users would not want even 1 second outage of metrics.
Right. And if we do 2, oh sorry, go ahead, Doug.
Or with WASM, it could be off, right? Go ahead, Doug.
I was just saying, I mean, if they're using Prometheus or Stackdriver, there's a time between each collection of metrics, right? So I mean, you might lose a second of the counters, but you're not going to lose reporting. So I mean, in some sense, it's not that big of a deal, right? It's 15-second time for scrapes or 1 minute reporting, right? So the time between the two things might be, you're not going to lose a reporting cycle.
That is a good point.
So yeah, that's a really good point. In that case, it definitely does not. Like adding more code to runtime. Yeah, we should like have a really high bar, and if this is okay, then we can just leave it at that.
Yeah, I guess we can always as well, if I mean, we can consider it lower priority, and if there's demand for it, we can always add it later, right?
Yep.
It's the implementation, not the API, so we can add it at any point, really.
Yep.
Okay, are we in a good place now with this?
Yep.
John, is there anything else?
No, I think that's good.
So since 111 is wrapping, I just wanted to add a spot if there's anything that we need to discuss about things that still need to be done for 111. Is there anything that anyone knows of that we need to address? Obviously, we still have those PRs outstanding for the telemetry API. But is there anything else that we should be trying to tackle before then? Or as soon as possible? Okay, I guess not. So the next thing I wanted to bring up was it's time to present our plan for 112. In 2 weeks, there's starting to present roadmaps for 112. I think getting a roadmap together in this next 2 weeks is probably aggressive. And then the next dates for presenting are in August. I'm going to be out of the office. So I was hoping I could find someone that would be willing to take the roadmap, and I will help, get it together, but I won't be there to present. So Madar.
So I will be there to present. I am out the second week of August, but as long as that's not the week when there is TOC, I think we're good.
Okay. So I'll sync with you then
Okay.
on getting on the calendar.
Yep.
And then I wanted to just solicit ideas from the group about things we should focus on in 112. There's telemetry API work, including some of the stuff that we just discussed. Are there other things that we should be like? Kawat, are you still here? Is there rate limiting work? Is there Envoy side work? What kind of things should we be adding as focus items for 112?
Rate limit work might possibly happen, but I think we still have to understand the requirements. So at the very least, we'll be doing requirements work.
So again, in terms of ideas, right? I think gateway telemetry, we have put it on, I think, like a year ago, and then we didn't really fully work on it. So yeah, we want to have essentially gateway, middle proxy, whichever one. But
Here's another one that's even older: is HBone telemetry and policy.
oh yeah, that's true.
Do we need to? I feel like we keep putting off, and so I'll put it back on here. Just general dashboard work, or support of multi-cluster scenarios. Are there other integrations type efforts? John, I think you had looked at Grafana. Are we in a good spot with some of the upgrade issues there? Do we need to do any more work for any of
You
those
mean like
integrations?
upgrading to Grafana 8 or whatever?
Yeah.
I think we're still waiting for some lawyer to say yes, but I'm sure they're going to if we mug them enough to finally give us an answer.
Okay.
But we don't need to upgrade necessarily. Like that's just a sample, and there's no really important features that I saw. So
Okay. I haven't seen any real big other issues with integrations. Is anyone aware of integrations work that has to?
So Doug, does providing open telemetry format belong in this list? Because I'm guessing it's not going to be done for this release.
Yep, we should put that work on.
Yeah, and then I don't know if that also includes supporting the well, is open telemetry tracing format supported already in Istio? I think it is, right?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Okay, good. So yeah, I mean, once these are done, if we provide hotel, I mean, we can have a nice blogging and marketing around, and possibly, invite some of the other vendors like Datadog and stuff to say, hey, we have better integration story. If you need, we provide open telemetry formats for everything, and you go and run with it.
I mean, so that involves Envoy side work, quite a bit of Envoy side work. But yeah, I mean, it's a.
Why do you say that? If you want the Envoy metrics to be also there, right?
Right, correct.
Okay. But if in the first instance we can just target all the agent metrics, which is all the service-oriented metrics, that should be good enough to start.
So agent metrics, and so actually, okay, the Envoy, all the Istio standard metrics take the same
Yes.
path as Envoy native metrics. So we'll have to solve the same problem there. The simpler problem is doing it in Go code, which is kind of the least useful. So I mean, I think we should absolutely put this on, but this is the kind of thing that can take not 1 but 2 quarters.
Yes, now I understand. No, that makes sense.
Surely the Envoy community is looking at OTel as well, right? We can't be.
Oh, no. They are, and in fact, there is like another team within Google that we can kind of work with to get it in. But yeah, my point is that if it's not already aligned, then getting the alignment and delivering it can take some time.
Okay. Well, I think this is a decent chunk of work, especially.
Doug, if you don't mind, I did want to ask one more thing. So for the telemetry API work, I know this time around we weren't handling customizing and enabling Envoy metrics. Is that going to be something that we should be handling in 1.12, or that's even further out?
That wasn't something I had planned to look at in 1.12.
And actually, to that point, right? If you go back a month ago, that was exactly the discussion there.
Yep.
Which is, to what extent do we have first-class support for Envoy native metrics, and what can be stable and what cannot be stable?
Sure.
At some point, well, I think we should have a sort of like a rough requirements doc, if that's the right thing that we want there. I'm not sure what exactly we want to do with Envoy metrics in terms of the telemetry API. Is it about exposing them, changing the ones that are exposed? What's the use case?
So for me, the use case, at least, and few of our customers is sometimes for debugging, and some of them are always turned on. They want some connection level metrics, for example, for HTTP. And the way to get them is to enable Envoy metrics.
Are you
for
looking
them.
at dynamic change, or is restarting Envoys okay?
Well, currently there is no other way other than restarting Envoys, because it either goes through proxy config or it goes through annotations.
Yeah, I know it is, but is it something you okay with?
I don't know the answer. I mean, customers are living with it right now. If it is a telemetry, if it's supported in telemetry API, dynamic would be good, because otherwise we'll have a lot of disconnect. You change something in the API which is not done in Istio, and then you go ahead and restart all your workloads, right? I don't know whether it can be done dynamically. You are the expert, Quat. Can it be?
Not now, but it would be nice to know if it's something that is important, because everything is possible. It's just a matter of whether it's worth it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it is definitely good to have, but first step would be at least providing an API which is better than mesh config or annotations.
Could we have anyway metrics provider type thingy, just sort of just have a native provider for Envoy metrics that is, I guess it's not really provider, but I don't know how to express it. I agree we need ability to customize Envoy metrics via API, but it's not really about provider, so I don't know where to put it.
Maybe what we should do in 112 is spend 112 getting a firm definition of the problem and the anticipated use cases down, and then we can, with the hope that 113 will be addressing that problem. Does that sound reasonable?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I mean, I think that what we've laid out here represents a decent chunk of work for 112. Are there WASM API stuff that we should look at as well? I'm getting nervous about that landing in 111 at this point. Mandar, or others' thoughts on needed work for WASM?
WASM API is not, it's an MVP, so I guess we have to wait and see how people respond.
Okay. Okay, well, unless there's anything else, does anyone else have anything they want to discuss, or should we adjourn?
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.